Welcome to the Silent Epidemic, brought to you by Omnia Health Group. We are here to discuss the unspoken truths about mental health. The country is in a crisis. We would like to talk about all the things that people are scared to say. I'm Hatice Mehmet-Quirk, and each month I'll be inviting a guest from various different industries to talk about their personal and professional experiences. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Victor Okoh, who is an old friend, old colleague of mine. Really nice to have you on the show, Vic.
Thank you very much.
So, before we get to the heavy stuff, I'll let the audience get to know you a little bit. So, I'm going to just fire some questions at you. What was your first ever job?
As a data analyst for an internet company, a .com company in the early internet years.
Wow. And who is your hero? Don't say me.
I would probably say my dad.
Your dad.
Yes. I think he's also a lawyer. And apart from bringing up 4 of his own kids, he probably brought up 13 other kids or relatives.
And he is such a lovely guy.
Yes, he is.
Do you prefer dogs or cats?
Definitely dogs.
Okay. What is your favorite memory?
I think growing up as a child in Lagos, having lots of friends, and the summertime there was really nice. It was nice, hot, and life was a lot simpler.
Yeah. And what do you do to relax?
I would like to say I read, but I prefer to either play with the kids or watch a series.
No. Okay, so now that we've got to know you a little bit better, or the audience has, I'd love it if you could share a personal experience of mental health, either of yourself or family member, colleague, friend.
So I have a friend who is, or who was in the industry, who had a series of unfortunate events which resulted in the closure of his practice. And he descended into alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and inevitably had to have an intervention by his family. He has taken a break from practice. He continues to have to take a break from practice, and the mental health effects of practice have been going on for the last, I would say, 9 years.
Wow.
And he's yet to recover. It's unfortunate because as at last week, he was still admitted into the hospital with seizures, and no one understands whether it's to do with the ongoing stress he still suffers till today, or whether there were other underlying issues. But he's gone from someone who was very positive, funny, jovial, to a shadow of himself. And till this day, I don't see how he has a way back to having normality.
So for you to witness that, how was that for you?
It starts off as a very slow decline, and you tend to see with colleagues, first it's a jovial sort of rant. Oh, well, we're all under stress. Let's go out for a drink. And then it starts to compound. Then you start to see mood swings. Then you start to see deterioration in relationships, professional, emotional, romantic, even familial. And then it then descends into a situation where it's totally self-destructive, where basic everyday functionality becomes a chore or a difficulty. And witnessing someone go gradually over the space of 10 years, 12 years, from being very positive, interesting, engaging, and personable, to someone who everyone has to avoid, even members of his own family. It is to a certain extent soul destroying, because you always seem to remember the person as they were, but not as they are now.
So it's almost like looking back, you could see the signs that he was going down the wrong path, and it just escalated and escalated and escalated to the point where people are avoiding him and don't want to be around him anymore.
Yes, yes, that's correct. I think there is a misconception that you can actually be a professional, whether a lawyer, an accountant, or anything, uh, and not be immersed in the stresses of the work you do. So there's one idea of saying, this is what I like to do. There's another idea of actually doing it, because doing it entails that, or requires you to go into certain practices that you might not, as a human being or as a person, be able to cope with. So the way I look at it is the idea of being a runner and wanting to run a marathon, and the ordeal of actually running the marathon and the toll it takes on the body. Not everyone is cut out to run a marathon, and not whatever everyone can go the distance. But people would like that idea of running the marathon, and they may like to jog, which is a totally different thing.
So do you almost think it was a situation where the idea of being a lawyer, having a law firm, running their practice, etc., seemed like it was ticking all the boxes of getting to where they wanted to be in life, but actually doing it and the impact of doing it wasn't what they expected?
Absolutely. And I think it's the same for a lot of people. So you find that, first and foremost, the practice of law has evolved at least over the last 40 years, and definitely over the last 20 years. It's evolved very, very quickly, and it will continue to evolve. The problem is you go in with an idea of law or the tools you think you need to practice law or practice any profession, and the changes that come in the intervening period of practice, you might not be prepared for them. And if you're not prepared for them, you might find that it becomes overwhelming, and not a lot of people have the tools to deal with that. Another case in point, I will say, are young professional women. Majority of the lawyers that qualify these days are women, but there is a disconnect between the practice of law and the reality of being a young woman who is going to get married and have a family and have to deal with childcare. You find that a lot of young female lawyers are working between 60 to 80 hours a week. It becomes very difficult to square that with having, just for the sake of argument, 2 children. And you then see that a lot of them have this conflicting emotions about, am I being a good mother? Am I giving enough at work? And then the question then becomes, how do you support them to be able to uh, allow them to continue in the profession that they love in a way that benefits them and benefits the profession and benefits their clients, whilst also realizing that they will also have uh, private obligations to family and friends and things like that. And I think the way law is set up, it probably is tougher for women than it is for men.
So you mentioned a couple of things there. You said like about women in the industry. How do they manage their balance between their getting married, having children, trying to keep up with the demand of the industry? 60 to 80 hours a week is a lot of hours. How do you support women that work within your organization?
We have a range of people in different circumstances. So whilst at the lower end of the spectrum, we have people that are quite young, are starting off in their career, and are able to give a lot of those hours. We try and make accommodations for those that are either starting a family or already have a family. One of the hires we had about 2 years ago, I had worked with her previously about 8 years prior, and she had already started a family and was expecting another child. And I could tell that there were difficulties because when you see people turning in an email at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, knowing that they have a 6-month-old or an 8-month-old, you then start to feel that it's not easy for them. So we had um, revised policies from working remotely, practically tailored around her, which have continued to another of the people in the office who has two children and who works entirely remotely. So we try and set up meetings around um, pick up and drop off times, so that we can allow that schedule to reflect the fact that they will have at least 2 hours where they pick up the kids from school and they may give them a snack and things like that. So we try and accommodate those things, and try to make sure that generally throughout the firm, the hours that people work are manageable. So I don't think anyone works 60 hours in the office or so, although it is quite normal in the profession to work over 40 hours a week. I would say at the very most, it's roughly about 50 hours, 55 hours at the most.
I was smiling there because it reminded me of when I gave birth to Kayla, and it was back in the days of the BlackBerry.
Yes.
And she was born at 6:31 in the morning. And I think at 9:30, I sent you an email on the BlackBerry, and you categorically told me to put it away or you was going to come and take it away from me.
That's correct.
But I do recall that feeling of, how do I get the balance? I'm all right, yes, I'm a mum, I'm going to commit to being a mother, but then at the same time, I don't want to lose my career and what I've worked such a long time to build on. It is a massive challenge for women.
Yes, that's absolutely true. It is, and that's one aspect. The other aspects of the profession and stress, we are all target driven, deadline driven, and there can be life-changing consequences, not just for you but for your clients, when targets and dates and deadlines are missed. You're dealing with situations where your client's liability could run into the tens of thousands, if not millions, and that's the reason why there is the added stress and pressure to deliver. And then the sense of overwhelming guilt if you feel like you're not living up to the expectation also does tend to play a part. So yes, those are some of the issues that we all face.
Yeah. So you mentioned there about deadlines, the consequences of those deadlines, which can cost, a lot of money to the clients. Then you've got that feeling of letting down the clients. You're committing to them to get this job done. You don't want to be letting them down, which comes with that pressure. How do you manage that pressure?
I think a lot of it comes down to what is realistic and managing expectations either for yourself, for your clients, and for your team. And understanding that it is a team effort. It doesn't just come down to you. And the other day, there was a young lawyer that came into my office and said, look, I need additional support because this is where I feel like I'm lacking. And I was pleased that they had the ability to approach and say, I need additional support. Not everyone feels like if they ask for the support, they'll get it. And that's understandable to a certain extent. So, firstly, from a personal level, you have to accept what you can and what you cannot do, and what is realistic and what isn't realistic. You need to also watch out for your team members. And it can be the smallest conversation, and it makes a whole lot of difference, either on a managerial level or on a peer level. You need to be able to watch out for each other and ask those questions. And if you can ask the questions of each other, how are you doing? You will find out that you will pick a lot more up. And sometimes you have to accept that you need to rely on other people. The amount of times that a colleague has come to me and said, look, such and such person is struggling, or I think they need a holiday. Those are things that you need to be able to manage. Also, on the other hand, you need to be a bit more organized. You tend to find that a lot of people think it's a fantastic idea when it's winter to go on a 2-week holiday. The problem you have is very quickly, employees use up all their holiday entitlement, and then they go for a period of 4 or 5 months without a break. You then start to see the first stages of burnout and the stress. And once they start to display stress, it impacts the rest of the team. So saying no to a holiday sometimes, they may not realize that you're doing them a favor uh, or the length of the holiday, but later on in the year, they sort of see what the benefits are. And it's all these sort of little things that you pick up on and you learn throughout your whole period of working or practice that you try and implement.
So it sounds like in supporting your employees, you make sure that the door's always open, they can come and talk to you. Looking out for each other as a team is important. So if one member notices that the other is stressed, they can come to you and say, look, so and so's having difficulty. What can we do about it? They might need a holiday. Managing their holiday periods so that they can spread them across the year to avoid that stress and burnout are all ways in which that you help the employees manage their well-being.
Yes.
Okay, how have your experiences with mental health in past places that you've worked shaped the way you lead your team?
That's a very good question. I think you have to also uh, be able to look at the bigger picture to a certain extent. And the work we do for the client is important, but there's absolutely nothing more important than um, self-preservation or the well-being of your team members as human beings, as colleagues, as friends, and things like that. So I always try and let them understand that it is not that serious. There's always a solution. And if there's a problem, then we need to find a way together. So that's the first thing. The second is you also have to remember that regardless of whatever goes wrong, you need everybody else to accept that you are the front line and your team members know that you will take the flak for them. And I think they become more committed to you, they trust in you more, and they are able to be more open with you. Um, also, you need to also understand to a certain extent that whilst you are colleagues, they also have personal lives, and the personal lives or their personal life can sometimes bleed into the work life. And you need to be alive to the fact that a lot of them will have their own private struggles. You're not there to manage them for them, but you are supposed to at least understand that it will happen. And uh, you should be able to offer at least a bit of support, whether it is bereavement in the family, difficult marital situations, difficulty with childcare or the health of a child, whatever it is, financial situations and things like that. I've had colleagues ask to take loans. I've asked colleagues with issues with matrimonial issues. I've had colleagues with difficulty with children. If you understand that they are a good employee and they can give you their best, in order to get them to give you their best, sometimes you need to be supportive of their personal issues and their personal problems.
So you don't just support from a business perspective or from a professional side. You're real and you're saying, actually, I understand that people are going to have issues with their marriages, children, financial difficulties, whatever it may be. So you've got that door open to say, I'm here to support. Don't want to delve too much into their personal
Of
experiences, but
course,
you are there to support them.
you have to. I think if you take a hands-off approach and say, this is not my problem, you're here 9 to 5 or whatever hours you work, and whatever you have, don't bring it into the office. I think that's a naive way of looking at it, because they take their work home and they work from home sometimes outside the working hours. They will bring their stuff into the office. Now, you don't want people having a full-blown domestic in the office, but within reason, you need to be able to be understanding.
So my last guest was also a lawyer in the industry, and he had a bad experience in the law firm that he worked in when he was going through difficulty. He kept quiet because he was worried about coming out and saying, I'm struggling, I feel a bit depressed, because he was worried that if he said that to someone in HR, it was going to affect his view, like how people viewed him within the establishment. And eventually it came out that he was having difficulty because he got to the point where he had to say something. 3 months later, he was out of a job. So he's sort of the opinion that a lot of people are scared to outright come out and say, I've got an issue.
True, and that also can be that can surround issues of liability, because there is a worry that the decisions or the way you manage your clients may may be deemed incompetent or negligent to a certain extent. There's a question about fitness to practice, and the liabilities can be quite enormous. And in those circumstances, you then have these competing issues with the firm, where if an employee has a serious mental breakdown and is unable to manage his workload and does a serious mistake, it could affect the employment of every single other person in the office. So you then have this serious competing issue of, do I preserve one and take a risk with everyone else, or do I preserve everyone else and let this one go to try and safeguard the practice? And it's never an easy situation, and it's never either for the employee or for the employer, because you may want to say, okay, right, let me go the distance. But the question then becomes, how much of a risk can I take? And even those people making the decisions, they probably are under stress as well. And sometimes the attitude is, I can't deal with another stress on my hand, so I'll take the quickest route out. But it's probably not the solution, or definitely not the solution. The best way is always to try and collectively and constructively find a way out. It might be that that person needs a break, and that's the best decision for that person, to take a break and come back stronger. It may be that they need adjustments to their working practices. It may be that they need to pivot away from what they are doing. But I think only when you have that constructive conversation can you find out what the best solution is for everyone.
So it's pretty much how you run things in your organisation. Because what you're saying is, I'd rather know of the situation so we can come to the resolution, so that we can control the risk, the knock-on effect that could, as you said, it could affect the employment of everybody within the organisation if someone takes a risk because they're not in the right frame of mind. I'd rather know of the situation, find the solution, work through it, and overcome it together.
Absolutely, and sometimes the person may come to the realization that what is on offer is by far better than what they are doing. And if it may be that someone says, okay, right, I didn't want to lose my job, but I'm under so much pressure. But the solution might be that you work less days, you take on less workload, you go out for a sabbatical, you go on holiday, or you have additional assistance. There might be there could be various solutions that could be brought, or it may just be that the person is not cut out for the kind of work you do. So they need to be honest with themselves. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to come together to find a solution that works for everyone.
I'm wondering, the person that you mentioned at the beginning, you said he had a massive struggle, and he still sounds like he's struggling now. I wonder if someone had taken that intervention with him many years ago, whether or not it would have made a difference to where he is now.
It probably would. It probably would, but I think at the time his struggles started, dealing with mental health in the workplace was actually quite novel. There were, we're talking about roughly um, the early or mid noughties. There were no issues, or firms or businesses weren't cut out to have discussions on mental health and awareness. It's, I think, developed over the last 10 years. And if the structures that are being put in place now were there to help him, he probably would have turned out a lot better. He volunteers right now for a charity that helps lawyers dealing with mental health and stress. And some of the calls that he gets, he says, are quite harrowing. And he says, anytime he feels the urge to go back into practice, he speaks or listens to these lawyers, and it brings back bad memories of what he went through. And he says, this is part of the reason why. So, yes, you're right. If these structures were in place, then it probably would have saved him.
This is the part of the show where we share a technique or some knowledge where people can manage their mental health. So how do you manage your work-life balance? Because from what you've described, it's quite fast-paced. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot to manage. How do you manage your work-life balance?
So when I first started, there was no distinction between work calls during the day and when I got home. I think about 5-6 years ago, probably around the time I got married, I started to not take work calls at home, except they were genuinely important and there was some real urgency. Previously, once I got home, I could be on the phone for 2 hours, 3 hours, looking at emails and things like that. I've tried to, one, switch those things off. And on weekends, tried to not look at certain things except they were really urgent. Because, like I said, the world will not stop if things aren't looked at. So that's the first thing, trying to differentiate and demarcate between what is work time and home time. Also, holidays were very rarely ever taken. And I used to look at a work trip as a holiday of sorts. So if I went away for 2 days on a work trip, I might tag on an extra day just to say, okay, well, they have taken a day off. My wife loves to travel. I think she's visited roughly just under 90 countries in the world. So I tend to take more holidays and frequently now. And also since kids have come, there is a requirement. You also don't want to miss out on anything. So you tend to spend more time with the kids and tend to enjoy a bit more with them. So you also try and make sure that there's that demarcation between work and home time.
You've mentioned there about having kids, and a lot of women may disagree with me here because a lot of, obviously there's a massive impact on the woman. We've spoken about that beforehand. But how did becoming a father impact you and your work career, your viewpoint with work? Because people forget that actually there is an impact to the father as well.
Yes. It become, I think your perspective changes to a certain extent, and the focus is no longer on work in terms of it being the main priority. So if you are for any person that has an interest in a business, either a partner in a business or a business owner, and you don't have kids, you tend to hear people say, "This is my baby." And they think about it all the time. They think about how you can make it better. They think about what the next innovation will be, how we can grow, and things like that. When you start to have kids, work might become one of the priorities you have, or your focus really starts to concentrate on the children and the time you spend with them and the enjoyment you get from spending time with the kids, that becomes your priority. And in that respect, you give, not that you give less value to work, but you actually put it in perspective. And you then realize, yes, it is important, but it's not the most important thing in the world.
So it's almost like having kids made you see things differently, where before you were almost all consumed by work.
Absolutely.
And now it's getting that it is important, but so is time with my children and my family.
Yes, there was a period of time in life when I was absolutely miserable on Boxing Day because I couldn't go into the office. And there was no one that would go into the office on Boxing Day because I enjoyed going into the office so much. Going into the office on a Saturday was almost like a treat because the place was quiet. I could have a meeting with a client without interruption. The phone would not be going off and things like that. But the idea of actually not spending time with family during the holidays actually doesn't appeal to me at all. There's no work in the world that is that important.
So you kind of, and I know this from you personally, from knowing you for so long, but you've done it the fast-paced work, constantly, almost all consumed by it. Now you've got that balance of actually, I'd rather be at home with my kids at the weekend and during the holidays. Have you noticed any change in your output?
I would say the output is actually a lot better. If I had to put it down to why, because it's more targeted. I rely more on colleagues now. Um, I have a longer term strategy play and a slower pace in terms of um, wanting to do as much as I can. But I think because there is a bit more longevity to the planning, it allows me to make better business decisions. So I think having children or starting a family has helped a lot. If knowing what I know now, I probably would have prepared to start a family earlier rather than focus so much on work.
So it's almost like it's giving you that focus of, okay, I'm going to be more careful with my time, and in being more careful with my time, I have to make sure I do X, Y, and Z by this point, rather than constantly spreading yourself thin,
Absolutely.
constantly working. Okay, so thank you so much for your time today. It's
My
been
pleasure.
lovely seeing you. We've got a bit of a theme going on the podcast where we finish asking all our guests the same question. And the question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Travel more and don't take it too seriously.
Thank you to Victor for coming in today. Thank you guys for listening at home. We are the Silent Epidemic. Like, share, follow. We will see you next time.